Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to NASCSP Community Level Work webinar. I'm Jovita, your moderator. Today's webinar on Roma Next Generation Proposed Revisions will be presented by Lauren Cook, CSBG Team Lead of NASCSP, Rae Tamblyn, Research and Communications Analyst with NASCSP, Jeannie Chaffin, Director of the Office of Community Services, Sonji Dawson-Johnson, Program Specialist with the Community Action Partnership, and Barbara Mooney, Director of the Association of Nationally Certified Roma Trainers. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. All attendees are on mute. If you have questions during the webinar, you can ask questions using the chat option on the webinar toolbar. The toolbar is located on the right-hand side of your screen. There, you'll see a text box where you can type a question for all panelists. Questions will be read aloud and answered during the Q&A portions of the webinar. When typing your questions, please identify the topic and slide, if possible, that your question relates to, as well as the panelists you'd like to have respond. In order to keep to our schedule, if we don't have time for all questions, we will compile your questions into a FAQ following the webinar. The webinar will be recorded and will be posted to the NASCSP website. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Cook.
Thank you, Jovita, and thank you for everyone who is on the webinar with us today. It looks like a lot of you have been with us on the webinars yesterday and last week for the kickoff, so thank you for staying with us and kind of walking through all of the pieces of Roma Next Generation. But for those of you who maybe were not on previous webinars with us or could use kind of an overview or reminder, we are in the initial comment period of Roma Next Generation. It runs March 3rd through April 1st. All of the pieces of Roma Next Generation have been posted to the NASCSP website, and you'll see on the slide that we have a shortened link to get to that page so that you'll have access to our component guide, also links to the surveys, and also the recordings and slides of the webinars. As we are going through this webinar series, we are recording each webinar and posting it to our website so that you can go back and listen to it again if you need to, or if you weren't able to be on the live webinar, it's available for you. Hopefully most of you received our constant contact announcement today that we have 3 surveys that are live and posted to our website. We have Survey 1 on the theory of change, Survey 2 on community level work, which is what we'll be talking about today in this webinar. And we also have Survey 4, which goes over the CSBG expenditures and agency capacity and also the resources reporting form. So please keep kind of a close eye on our Roma Next Generation page as we're going to be posting additional links to the surveys and resources as we get through this comment period. And then just another resource that we have a Roma Next Generation 2016 @gmail.com email account. You can send us any of your questions. If you need some guidance on how to organize your feedback, you can contact all of us at NASCSP through that Gmail account. So as you all know, we're in our webinar series. Today we're talking about community level work. We are having an in-person event at the NCAF Legislative Conference on Thursday of this week. So please, if you are in town and you'll be at the conference, please come by and see us. It's going to be a more informal event where you'll have a chance to talk to NASCSP, OCS, and partnership staff about Roma Next Generation, start kind of engaging in the dialogue, telling us your thoughts, your questions on each of the pieces of Roma Next Generation. That event will run from 11:30 to 3:30 in the same hotel as the NCAF Legislative Conference, and again, that's coming up this Thursday. So we can go ahead and get started with our objectives for today's webinars. we're really going to be focusing in on the importance of community-level work, also taking a look at how we describe the different kinds of community-level work that you're all doing in your communities, whether that's independently as an agency, maybe you're working in partnership with other organizations in your community, or you might be a part of a collective impact initiative. We'll also take a look at the elements that we've proposed to clarify community-level work. So we're thinking about the strategies list and the strategies report form. We'll take a look at the community-level NPIs and the reporting forms for those indicators. We'll also take a look at the community-level efforts and progress, and we will touch on collective impact a little bit more. And then at the end, we'll give you a review of the community-level survey so you can get a sense of how we're going to be asking questions about all of these pieces and how you can submit your feedback to us. So to start us off, we thought it would be helpful kind of to ground us in what we already know about community-level work. This is that individuals and families cannot be successful if there are no opportunities or supports in the community. Community action really joins with stakeholders with a specific purpose. We're looking at improving conditions, increasing access within our communities. We might be looking at policies and working in advocacy efforts, and also addressing a specific factor or problem that is faced by the community where you're working. We really want Community Actions Network to reach out in the broader community to take action. And we're also recognizing that communities are improved when people with low incomes are engaged and active in building those opportunities in their community. So as many of you know, we've been working with a Roma Next Generation work group since about August of 2015. And also prior to that, we've done a lot of thinking about what our current community NPI data is able to tell us. So as we've been reviewing some of that data, it kind of appears that agencies are really good at programs for individuals and families, but when it comes to community-level impact, such as increasing the number of living wage jobs in a community, the agencies aren't there yet. And it may be that we don't have the documentation to show us that community action agencies are engaged in kind of the larger systemic issues. So as we're thinking about what the NPI data tells us and what we want it to be able to tell us, it looks like there might be some underreporting at the community level. Some possible reasons for this could be that our current NPIs aren't understood well enough. It could be that they aren't being tracked well enough at the local level to be reported on. It could also be that the NPIs are not appropriate to really capture the work being done by local community action agencies. Another kind of challenge or barrier we're seeing in how we're collecting data currently is that community initiatives take many years to reach an outcome. So the community action agency's work isn't seen in every report period. So we've done a lot of thinking about some of that information that might be lost and how community level work is currently reported. So now let's think a little bit about what is needed in terms of community measures. We need to be able to tell the story of community level impact of CSBG. We need data that's easy to understand and allow some meaningful summary at the national level. We also need a common set of measures to track the CSBG network's performance with respect to the impact of strategies provided at the community level. So we're looking at how to relate all of the agency's community activities, not just those funded by CSBG, and we're looking at data to help agencies and states analyze what is working and identify steps to improve interventions and impact. Another really important piece of what we need in our community measures is being able to capture the scope and the scale of an impact or intervention. So right now you may be working in an initiative with one employer to add a new facility that ends up hiring 100 people. Or you might be working to ensure 4 clinics aren't closed so that this serves thousands of people. And this work may happen in a neighborhood, within your county, in a tri-county area, and it may happen over several years. So currently, the outcomes of these initiatives might only be showing as one when you're reporting this in the current NPI data. So we've done some thinking and made some changes so that we can get a little bit more information to reflect all of the work that goes into these initiatives. We also need data to really understand what the measures mean. So we've done some thinking about needing a baseline data that tells us what the current status is. And then the performance data could be compared to that baseline data. We're also looking at how you can use maybe existing population level data that might look at a teen pregnancy rate or crime rate in the community, possibly recidivism, to give your data a little bit more meaning. So now we're up to our polling question. We'd like to get a sense of the community level work that you are doing in your community before we get into each of the pieces of Roma Next Generation, before we look at the strategies, the indicators, and the efforts and progress tool. So Jovita, if you could pull up the polling question. Okay, and we're wanting to hear from you if you do community level work at your agency, and if you do you do that independently in partnership with at least one other organization, or are you working in a collective impact initiative?
My apologies, Lauren. I believe I pulled up the wrong poll. So if we could just hold on, we're going to go back to the correct poll.
Okay.
Okay, so we should have the correct poll up now.
Yep, that looks good. Thanks, Jovita.
And it looks like we're just now reaching about 60% of those we have on the call or on the webinar having responded. So we'll give it a little bit more time.
Hi, I'm just going to jump in and say a couple things as people are doing the poll. It's Barbara Mooney speaking. And some of you may be asking, what does this mean, collective impact initiative? We will be talking about that later in this presentation. So if you don't know what that is, then you probably aren't doing it, would be my suggestion. So maybe not suggest that. And if you do things, if you do more than one, there isn't a way for you to select more than one. Maybe pick the one that you do most.
And it looks like the responses are slowing down, so if folks could take a moment, if you haven't already, to respond, we're going to close it out in just a few seconds. And we have just a few additional responses coming in before we're able to share the results.
Okay, so it looks like the majority of folks on the webinar today are doing community level work. It's good to see. And the majority are doing community level work in partnership with at least one other organization. And we have some people on the webinar who are doing collective impact. I think we can go ahead and move on now to community level strategy. So I'll turn this over to Rae Tamblyn.
Ray, before you start, I just want to jump in and say it looks like we have the choir here on the session. We have the majority of people who do community level work. So as Ray talks about strategies and as we talk about the new NPIs going forward, be thinking of how you could share your experiences with your peers as we roll out Roma Next Gen. Sorry, Ray, go ahead.
Sure, thanks, Barbara. So we're going to talk a little bit about the community level strategies, which is a newer reporting strategy. So the intention here is to provide documentation of the strategies that are used by eligible entities to affect community level change. So our intent is that community action agencies will report on strategies that they are utilizing. So again, this is a menu. You choose what applies and you do not report on what you do not do. And our intent here is to tell the story of how strategies and community level outcomes connect. So we've broken out the strategies into categories, and these will be familiar to you as these are our consistent domains. So we have employment, education, and cognitive development, infrastructure and asset building, housing development, health and social behavioral development, and then we additionally have community support services and emergency management, as well as civic engagement and community involvement. And these strategies are related to goals, the new proposed goals 2 and 3. So as a quick example, for the employment domain, we have, after working with the Roma Next Generation work group as well as peer feedback from many of you over the years, we've composed a list of the proposed strategies, which is available on the Roma Next Generation website. And examples of this are minimum or living wage campaigns, job creation initiatives, employment generating projects, EITC campaigns, etc. And we have drafted a series of reporting forms. And I'm going to walk through these because I think it's very important to understand how each level contains different but similar information. So at the local agency level, we're going to, again, use the employment strategies example. You can see that you'll report by agency, and you're going to be able to choose more than one strategy that you're doing. So you'll see on one side the type of strategy that is a possibility that you're implementing at your agency level, and you have the option of entering how many strategies you are doing. So in our example, this agency in question is doing one living wage campaign, one job creation initiative, and one EITC campaign, but they are also doing 3 job fairs. So we've built this as a menu to allow you to report on all of the work that you're doing within these types of strategies. At the state level, we are going to be aggregating this. So the form that you just saw is the data form that agencies will fill out. At the state level, the state will be able to tell how many strategies are implemented within the entire domain. So if we wanted to go, for example, to our local legislator or a state legislator and say that out of the 25 total agencies in this example state, 13 are doing implementing strategies related to employment. And then because we have this automatic roll-up, we're going to be able to say how many agencies are doing specific strategies with the intent to cause community-level change. So in this example, of these sample 25 agencies, we know that 10 agencies are running 11 job creation initiatives. So this allows us to really summarize the types of methods and strategies that agencies are doing, both at their local level and then up onto the state level. And similarly, at the national level, we'll be able to carry that roll-up forward. So we'll have an idea of how many states are reporting that their agencies are doing work at the community level in employment, the total number of agencies that are reporting any strategy at all within the employment domain. And then we'll also be able to know the kinds of strategies that are being reported by state and by agency. And this will really help all three levels of the network. Our hope is that this will provide a snapshot of the focus, both at the local, state, and national level, so that we'll be able to get a sense of where the main strategies are focused, the types of work that is being done, as well as the total number of agencies that are deeply involved in these strategies that are intended to cause community-level change. So I think I turn it over to Barbara, but I do want to take a quick second and note that when we referenced that we had looked at community-level change and decided that it's possible that it's being underreported, a lot of what we mean by underreported is that we understand that these are effort-intensive, higher-level services or strategies that are being done, and a lot of times we'll see a lower level of reporting because it's based on the end of the program and the project as opposed to the work that's ongoing. So we've tried to modify our reporting, and Jeannie will discuss this in a little bit in an attempt to really help us capture the ongoing effort as well as that final strategy that's been implemented and achieved an outcome. So I will go ahead and pass this to Barbara.
Thanks, Rae. Just one more comment on the underreporting. The level of reporting is what we're referencing on the IS report, that fewer agencies report on community level NPIs as they currently exist in the IS report than on the individual and family level NPIs. So we believe that because our network really has been built on the belief that family and community outcomes are intertwined, that we should see a greater number of agencies reporting on the community level. And Lauren mentioned some of the reasons why we might not be seeing that. I just wanted to remind us our original legislation back in '64 talked about the elimination of poverty or causes of poverty through development of opportunities and so on, and bettering conditions. And in the 89 legislation, it talks about the revitalization of low-income communities. So this has been entwined in our work. And what happens in Roma Next Gen is we're redoubling the focus on community-level efforts and outcomes. You've probably heard me tell this story before, but I like to extend the metaphor that if you teach a man to fish, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, and if you teach the man to fish, you fed him for a lifetime. And so many of our programs, our services, are about helping to teach people to fish and provide them with the skills to do their work. But I challenge you to think about, what if the fisherman doesn't have access to the pond, or what if the pond is not in good shape and the fish are dying? We need to be good stewards of the pond, and we need to promote that level of work, so that that once people are learning to fish, they have access and there are actually fish there to catch. So we've created some new national community level performance indicators, and we're hoping that that we'll be able to tell the story. You could move to the next slide. Tell the story of the community level impact that CSBG funding and community action agencies are having. It's about having a common set of measures that really speak to the impact of the strategies that are provided at the community level. And of course, as always, we want to collect all the agencies' community activities, not just the CSBG funded ones. And we're hoping that these indicators are worded in such a way that it helps agencies and state analyze what is working, so that we can improve interventions and impact. The community level indicators are based on a set of assumptions. When we first started talking about new community level work, we're looking at what is a community, and we've often said a community is locally defined, and that's going to become a real important part of the indicators. As you identify needs through your community needs assessment, you'll be saying, what is the community that we're going to impact? Where is our work going to be focused? And so that community will be a locally defined it'll be a locally defined community, and that will depend on the project. And that, as we talk over time, we have a new tool about community level efforts in progress, and this will allow us to move forward over time. And the agencies are going to report only on the things that they do, only on the areas that are impacted, not the entire list. And we've included an other indicator in each of the categories. So earlier in this presentation, we've talked about the services and strategies, what people will do, and now we're going to talk about the outcomes, and the outcomes as indicated by national performance indicators. We've arranged the national performance indicators into 6 domains: employment, education, and cognitive development, infrastructure and asset building, housing, health and social or behavioral development, and civic engagement and community involvement. And there are 29 indicators in the that are referenced related to Goal 2 and 2 related to Goal 3. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the indicators. You'll see in the coming slides, you'll see a list of indicators. You'll be able to look at this in greater detail in the survey. And we really want you to look at the survey. If the language doesn't seem right, if there are issues that you raise, we will look at them, we will think about them, and try to make adjustments. So in this one, we're talking about the number of jobs, both created and maintained, and you see that these are jobs created to increase opportunities specifically for people with low incomes, and that we're also talking about living wage jobs, And then the last one there, number 5, decrease of unemployment benefit applications. This was selected as a way of showing that the community was healthier, that employment opportunities were greater. And then other, you'll see the other income indicator in all of the areas. In the next domain, education and cognitive development, you'll see a number of these relate to children and youth. Children in the community are kindergarten ready. Youth are attending post-secondary education. That there's a decrease in the grades 3 to 12 of children who are behind in grade level behind in reading or math. Then there's also an indicator about adult literacy, an increase in adult literacy rate in the community, and then increase in high school graduation or high school equivalency rates, and then other again. The next one is infrastructure and asset building, and this one is not, we don't have all of them shown here. There are a number of these. This is the place where access to some services will be found. So this is the number and percent of assets or resources that are built in the community or that are created in a community or that are made accessible to low-income communities. The number and percent decrease in barriers or negative conditions, so things like abandoned buildings, improved relationships between police and community, emergency response time, a decrease in the amount of time that it takes for the EMT or police or fire to get to you or get to your community, decrease in the number of paid attenders. You can see the kind of things that are a part of this domain, and there are others in this domain as well. And we've got an other to add to it for other folks. And the next one is housing. So safe and affordable housing units developed, maintained, or whose value was improved. The number of shelter beds established in the community or maintained. Decrease in homelessness, decrease in the rate of homelessness or foreclosure rates. You see some of the language is different. It's about rates of decrease, and so we'll need to think about that here as we look at the reporting. Health and social behavior development. We talk about health services, the number of health services added or made accessible within a certain radius. Decrease in some of the characteristics of well-being, increase in well-being, decrease in things like infant mortality, childhood obesity, and uninsured families, and an increase in child immunization. And there are more of these as well, so make sure that you look at the full range of outcomes. These are outcomes now that we're talking about. Oh, here are some more of them. Mental and behavioral health, teen pregnancy rate being decreased, unplanned pregnancies decreased, substance abuse decreased. So you can see the sense of this indicator in this domain area. Okay, and how will these be reported? Is this you, Rae? Are you going to talk about the reporting?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you then.
Great. So before we really dive into the nitty-gritty of these column headers and what goes where, I want to re-emphasize that this is a similar situation to the strategies report, where the information at the 3 levels is similar but nuanced different. So having said that, at the agency level for community-level NPIs. We are proposing that we are collecting a target community, so you'll be able to select from a drop-down the community in which you are working. So in this example, it's a city and a neighborhood, and we are asking for the baseline. And this is the existing starting point that is used for your comparison. And our intention here is that without knowledge of what is, it's very difficult to measure change. So we're also asking for a target result, which would be the number added. So it is not that you're trying to get to 250 in this example. It is that the intention is to create 50 jobs to increase opportunities for people with low income. This allows us to automatically calculate in these forms the expected change from the baseline. So our intention here with this NPI is to increase the employment potential within the community by 25% through the addition of these 50 jobs. We will also then be reporting at the agency level the actual results. So I intended to add 50 jobs. I, in fact, added 56. This then allows us to automatically calculate our change from that baseline. So we wanted to add 25%, but we really added 28. This performance target accuracy column is very familiar to the network in that this is our 80 to 120% of our accuracy in our planning. So these are two different percentage calculations in that one of them tells us how successful we are in achieving actual change from what existed, and the other tells us how successful we are in our ability to plan for and achieve outcomes based on our agency capacity, our funding, and various elements that go into setting your performance target. So that is sort of the strategy and the idea behind the agency level data forms. So we realized that adding and aggregating these types of information will be difficult and meaning would be lost at a state and a national level. So our proposal is that the state and the national forms will look slightly different. So while at the local level, you would establish your own baseline of, in this example, it was the 200 existing jobs and 50 existing living wage jobs that you knew because you work in your community existed and you were trying to establish the new 50 jobs. We are only asking at the state aggregate report the actual and the target, so your baseline is incredibly valuable to you at a local level so that you're able to set and explain your variances and understand the kind of impact that you're making locally. For the state and the national level, we're really trying to get a sense of what was created. So you can see here that the target number and the actual number is aggregated. So in my state, in this example, I have 20 agencies that reported employment outcomes, and I achieved a change in that I have added 448 jobs. And of the 20 agencies reporting, 95% of them were able to achieve their performance target. And there will be the ability to report comments and provide explanations for variances because we understand that there are a lot of variables in community work and that agencies working in dynamic communities that are affected by outside influences and outside events. So at the state level, we will also be able to say the number of agencies reporting by type of community. And this is important in that it sets a context for us because at the local level, you know the context in which you are working. But it's helpful at a state and national level to be able to say that we have a certain number of agencies that are targeting their cities, targeting a county, targeting neighborhoods, because that will also help us to weight and explain the results, because achieving results in a neighborhood will be a larger or smaller number than a county, for example. So at the national level, we would have a similar type of report in that we'll still aggregate the target and the actual numbers, and we'll be able to say the number of states that are reporting an outcome, the number of agencies, and then the agencies and the types of communities in which they are working. So again, that baseline number has been dropped from these total aggregate reports and are essential to the local agencies. And the agencies will be setting their own baseline numbers based on their agency community action plan, their relationship with the state, and their community in which they've decided to work. So, yeah. I think we have a polling question. Do you agree that the list of community level outcomes reflects the work that your agency does in your community? And I think Jovita will, yep, great. So while you're all taking this quick poll, I want to reiterate that the baseline for the report is a number that is defined by the agency for the agency. So if you know that you cover multiple counties and that you are working to create jobs in a city as well as a county, you will be able to select multiple communities. So if you're doing one program that's working at a city level, you would be reporting that baseline number and those numbers by the city and then again by the county, since these would be different programs and initiatives.
And as you're thinking about how you would set these baselines, I would say you will be doing that based on your planning activities, your the research that you've done on your needs assessment. What made you decide that you were going to do this project? Did you find that there was a lower number of young people from a certain school district that were going to post-secondary school, those that than their peers, and you decided to work with that community? Did you see that in this community there were no grocery stores or there was no fresh food, and you decided to work on that? So it's really about how you know. It's a way to demonstrate that you know what exists currently, and that has led you to your strategies for what you plan to do.
And it does look like the responses are slowing down, so we're going to give you a few more seconds, just a heads up, before we go ahead and close the poll and show the results. Okay, and we're gathering our last few responses before we are able to share the results. And shortly you all should be able to see the results of the polling.
So I think that we had a large percent of no answers, maybe because they're waiting to look at the surveys and provide their information in the surveys about these things. You'll have an opportunity to answer this kind of question in the surveys and to answer it about each of the domain areas. So some of the comments that are in the chat will be, you can reflect that in more depth and more clarity in the surveys. But we see a large number that did agree that this is capturing the community outcomes and in a reasonable way. Okay, are we ready to move on?
Yes, we're ready, Barbara.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the last domain that we didn't mention earlier, civic engagement and community involvement. The interesting thing about this domain is that it can be, well, it's actually all of the domains, employment, housing, so on, will have some indicators of change at both the family level and at the community level. So you'll see when we do our family discussion, you'll see some examples of outcomes indicators in this domain. But for today, we're going to talk about the improvements and gains that are tracked at the community level, meaning those changes in communities that are served. And when we talk about who's involved in this, it's the community, and who may they be? They may be your partners, your funders, can be policymakers, volunteers, board members, business representatives, other individuals, regardless of their income status. This is the goal 2 activity, that the communities are improved. But this domain also has the additional opportunity of being able to provide measures for goal 3, that people with low income are engaged and active. And so you'll see some examples of both of these levels. At the goal 2 level, at the community level, it's the number of community members working with community action to improve conditions in the community. So it's the number of people who donate time, the number of people who participate specifically in public hearings, policy forums, or other advisory boards, and then the number of community members working towards other indicators that you're going to be able to specify. And then the third goal will be really related to those individuals with low income that are engaged in the community effort, where community action is a critical member of the leader of the effort. So the statement's interesting that individuals are most probably not participants of the agency, and but because if they're participants of the agency, you may be able to track them on a family or individual level, and so you'd be reporting outcomes for your participants in one of the family NPIs in this domain. But for this domain, or for community level, we're looking at perhaps the populations of low-income people that are from housing authority programs or from neighborhood committees. And so in this one, we will be counting, I think the next slide, the number of people with low income who participated to improve the delivery of services or conditions in the community, or the number of people with low income who maintained, acquired or maintained leadership roles, because that's a real indicator of change for the community. Okay, we don't have a polling question about those, but you'll be able to respond to them during the on the survey. So make sure that if you have questions about that, you have an important role in responding to them. So now I'm going to turn this back over for discussion about community level efforts in progress.
Thanks, Barbara. This is Jeannie Chaffin, and for you I don't know, I'm Director of the Office of Community Services, and I was asked to come and help today to set the stage and provide some explanation for this next component, which is new. So it's good to spend a little bit of time on it so that as you guys go in and try to make comments, you understand fully what the intention was behind this piece. So before I dive into community level work in progress, I want to say a couple things because I wasn't here when Lauren and Rae and Barbara kicked off the webinar. I want to say I hope that you've all went and looked at the kickoff webinar that's recorded and saved on the NASCSP website, because on that webinar we provide a lot of context about what we're trying to achieve with Roma Next Generation. I think it's really important to keep our goal in mind of we're really endeavoring here to improve services for individuals with low incomes and for communities. And all of the data and forms and efforts that we're talking about today and we'll be talking about on subsequent webinars are really in pursuit of improving services. And that's vitally important in today's world, where we're really trying to address some really wicked problems that are complex and multifaceted. And certainly our ability to intervene at the community level is very important when we're talking about complex problems. So I wanted to make that statement. And then the other statement that I wanted to make is that it's really, really important to OCS, to NASCSP, to all the national partners, and to me personally, that everybody step back and take a minute and look at all of these forms and reporting and analysis and data pieces really closely. We have a long history in our community action movement of making sure that we create tools that strengthen our movement and our network, and I think this is a time when that couldn't be any more important. And only through everybody putting their eyes on this and making constructive suggestions will we come out with a tool that makes our network stronger. So with those comments, I'm going to proceed here to talk about community level work in progress. And this is a piece where in wanting to be able to demonstrate the range of issues and problems that community action agencies are addressing on the community level, we decided that we needed a way to show what agencies are working on at the community level. And so we know that oftentimes community level projects are multi-year, and that you may be working independently with others or with the whole community to really make change. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But this form that I'm going to talk about and the reporting tools that I'm going to highlight really, we hope, create space to show the progress that agencies are making along the way on really complex problems. And it's important that we're creating that space so that we can do more in community level work. So first off, before I go over some of these data elements, I wanted to just lay a little bit of groundwork because I'm going to reference in several of these pieces collective impact. And many of you, I'm sure I've always seen on the comments, are very familiar with that term collective impact. But to make sure that all these data elements have meaning, I want to just talk about that for a moment. And collective impact is sort of a term that's been using a term of ours that people are using a lot right now about bringing a group of folks together in a community to solve very complex problems that really no one individual, one organization could solve on their own. And there's been a lot written about collective impact, and there is agreement that you have to have 5 conditions present to have a collective impact effort. And those are that the group, the actors who are a part of this effort, have to have a common agenda. So perhaps it might be getting more low-income children in a community to graduate high school and move into post-secondary education. That those actors, that the folks involved have a shared measurement system to determine if they're moving that agenda. And that they work together, those actors, to realign the resources and the activities in the community. It's also, there are 2 conditions that have to be present to make this successful. One is that there's a backbone organization that's working to keep everybody together around that common agenda, that's supporting the measurement system, that's helping to realign, and that there's communication on all these things between the actors. So probably many of you are at your desk right now thinking about, well, that's not what we call it at my community action agency. We don't use the term collective impact, but we've been doing that kind of work for years. And I would not be surprised to hear many of you say that. This is what it takes to move many of the conditions and causes of poverty that are in our communities today. And our efforts need to be able to show that agencies are doing these kind of things. So, there is also a frame of reference around these multi-year projects that there are certain things that happen early in the years, certain achievements, milestones, benchmarks that you might reach in the middle years, and then all of these efforts have to have clear shared outcomes, as I said before. So those are probably what happen in later years. And so in the early years, it's a lot about creating the backbone organization, the shared measurement, figuring out how you might realign resources in the community. In the middle years, you may begin to see some intermediate outcomes, some changes in behaviors in a community, some systems level changes that will lead to those long-term outcomes that the community is committed to in this particular collective impact. And here's a good place for me to note that, you know, all of these collective impact efforts that we would be asking about or that you might be reporting on will have outcomes, and those outcomes may or may not link up with the outcomes that Barbara just talked about in the NPI, in the community NPI forms. And what our vision is here is that there's enough flexibility. You can see that on the community level NPIs, we have an other category. If you're working on a collective impact effort, you may link up with one of the NPIs that we have listed, or you may use other. The form that I'm about to talk about is going to reflect the work that you're achieving along the way. And in the later years and the last years, when you're actually achieving and moving the outcome, those outcomes will be reported on the NPI form that Barbara and Rae talked about before. So what I'm going to talk about is sort of the in-progress work. So there's a form in here called Community Level Work in Progress. And the first thing it's going to do is ask a few questions about your community level work. Do you do work independently? So maybe the Community Action Agency is a housing developer, and they are creating housing all on their own. That would be independent work. And the next question we'll ask about, are you doing community level work in partnership? So perhaps the Community Action Agency is partnering with a community development corporation to bring more living wage jobs into the community. That might be a partnership type of strategy. And then finally, the collective impact that I mentioned, are you serving as a backbone organization or as a key partner in a collective impact effort? Maybe the school, the Chamber of Commerce, the county, and others are involved, other civic clubs. a wide array of organizations from the public and private sector all are involved. And maybe you're working, as I said, on helping low-income students get into post-secondary education. So we'll ask about that. And then once we've answered those questions, if you indicate that, yes, we're working on an effort that's either an independent effort or a partnership effort, there'll be some questions for you to answer about each of your initiatives. So you'll see there's initiative 1, 2, 3, 4. In a community action agency, you might have one, housing development independent project. You might have a second initiative, as I said, like with your community development corporation in your community, and then maybe you have a collective impact. So the mix is going to look different by community action agency. That's all driven by your community needs assessment and what's needed in your local area. So you'll list each initiative, and then there's a few questions that you'll be asked about what domain are you working in, employment, education, infrastructure. There's some drop-downs there that you can pick from. It'll ask about the expected outcome, so each project has to have an outcome, and that's also a drop-down that you can pick from the NPI list. Or there's an opportunity for you to define an other, because we are very cognizant that local communities are different, and this is driven by the needs in each community. And then target and some expected duration questions. So if you'll see at the bottom of the forms or at the bottom of the PDF, if you're looking at this in a printed form, there are the domains listed. So there's a tab for each domain. And there's drop-downs in each of those tabs for some of these questions. So that's sort of the first table, table 1, for community level efforts in progress. And then if you're actually doing, the other one was for independent and partnership. This one is for collective impact. And this is built on the framework that I mentioned around collective impact. So in the early years, you might be working on the common agenda and forming a backbone organization. And in this form, it allows you to check mark which of the items under common agenda or backbone infrastructure you've achieved in your agency for that particular reporting period. So in the first year, you might have 1 or 2 of these rows ticked off. And then over time, you probably would move through some of these columns into what is on the next slide, which is the middle years. And the middle years are the items I mentioned around, I'm sorry, we don't have a slide on the middle years, but in the form and in the survey, you'll see that there's some middle years around policy and system changes. And then in the end, what outcome did the project achieve? So I'm sure this is newer, and folks may have some questions about this, and we're doing really good on time, so we will be able to answer a lot of questions. But this is really focused on the progress that agencies are making with community-level change work up to the period when they're actually begin achieving their outcomes. When you're actually achieving outcomes, it'll go on the NPI listing, and in the years leading up to that, it would be under the community level efforts in progress. I think we have a polling question on some of this, so we'll move over to that. Okay, do you agree the efforts in progress report allows you to better report on your work at the community level? And so I think Jovita will work on opening that up.
And it looks like folks are beginning to respond. And we did receive some feedback earlier related to some of the polling questions. So we do understand that while there are a number of local community action agencies on the webinar, we do also have a number of associations and state offices for whom some of the questions may not be as relevant. So thank you for those of you who pointed that out, and we'll certainly take that into consideration as we're looking at the responses. And it looks like those responses are slowing down. So for those on the webinar who would like to respond, please do so. We're going to go ahead and close the poll in a few seconds so that we can go ahead and see the results. And it looks like we're getting a great number in terms of feedback to this particular question, so thank you for that. We're just collecting a few last-minute responses before we close the poll completely and show the results. And hopefully folks can see on their end the results from the polling shortly.
All right. Well, thanks, Jovita, and thanks to all of you who did vote. So I see that our number of undecideds is relatively high, and I'm not surprised. I think, you know, this is a new area for us, and folks are probably mulling over, trying to think about how it will or won't work for them, what information it will reveal that will be helpful at the local level. States are probably thinking about how they might use this information to better manage, and then certainly we here at the national level are thinking about how we will frame. You know, we're feeling like it will be a really positive thing for us to be able to talk about how many community-level projects are in the works in the different domains, and then to be able to talk about how many are independent, partnership, and collective, with the idea that they will lead to outcomes down the road. So I think we've all got more to consider here, but we're off to a good start. So with that, I think I want to just talk, sort of make a closing, kind of tie some of this up with a bow. And on this slide, and you probably saw, if you've looked at our kickoff webinar slide, you will have seen this too. And this is an effort for us to just try to send the message that we really are endeavoring to pull a lot of this information together. And as you know, today we've just looked at community, but in the subsequent days you're going to look at the family level information, demographic information, expenditure information, and we're really trying to help everyone understand that we believe pulling all that information together will allow us to talk about the results. So that will be either from the family or the NPI, family or community NPI information, that will be able to pull information from the demographic reports and talk about who we're serving, what services and strategies we're providing. So you saw the strategies report today. And then down the road, you'll see the information that we're collecting and that we've been collecting for some time about expenditures and resources administered. All that opens up a really new approach to analyzing our data and making meaning of it at every level. So how can agencies take this information and make meaning of it so they can enhance their services for people and communities? How can the state pull this information together, make meaning of it, and then how will we at the national level? And we think we're on the road here to a new ability to do that with this new data. But we'll only get there if all of you give us great feedback and look very deeply at every piece of this and give us constructive suggestions about how to enhance it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lauren to talk about collecting feedback.
Thank you, Jeannie. And thank you, everyone. We see the questions coming in through the chat. We will get to the Q&A portion after we talk a little bit about kind of method of collecting feedback from everyone on this particular area of Roma Next Generation. So what we are calling Survey 2 focuses on community level work. So this survey will collect your feedback on the strategies list, on the national performance indicators, and that community level efforts in progress tool. So to give you an idea, we've listed some of the questions that are included in that survey. And again, you can go to our website and pull up a Word document, also a PDF version of this survey, and the link is live on the website. The Word document is posted so that you can not only review the questions before you would enter them into the survey, but you could record your responses on that Word document and then go ahead and copy and paste into the survey once you're ready. Just a couple logistical pieces. The surveys can only be reported on once per device. So an agency can have multiple people report on the survey as long as they are reported on using different devices within that agency. We know people are thinking about how they'll collect the feedback and send it to us via the survey. Some states are organizing 3-day meetings to go over all of these pieces and submit their comments together. They might be having a listening session to then collect comments and send into the survey. We have built in the ability for you to tell us how many agencies or organizations are represented by your feedback. So if you need assistance in how to collect and organize your survey responses, please reach out to us and we'll do our best to be a help to you. But just so you can get a sense of the questions we're asking about community level work, first we'll start with the community level efforts in progress report. You have the opportunity to kind of give us on a scale how well this piece captures the work you do for communities over time, how it helps you describe the impact of the work you do independently, in partnership, or through a collective impact initiative. And then you'd have the opportunity to give us some open-ended comments as you work through the survey on each of these pieces. It would be kind of the same format for the strategies. You could give us kind of a ranking overall about the strategies in each domain, and then you could provide open-ended comments on each of the domains, just in terms of looking at the strategies listed. And then when we get to the NPIs, you can, again, on a scale, rate per domain, and then provide your open-ended comments per indicator. So it'll walk you through each domain, and you can select which of the indicators you might give us some detailed feedback on. You might be thinking of ways we could modify or improve some of the indicators listed. There's also space for you to give us feedback just as a whole. So maybe you're looking at these pieces just kind of in general, and there are things that you want us to know, and so that we can incorporate that feedback and make some tweaks and changes to the pieces in Roma Next Generation. So we are now ready for our question and answer portion. I'm going to turn this over to Jovita.
As the panelists are reviewing your questions, thanks to all who have submitted questions. We received a number, and they're very detailed, and we do appreciate you following the format that we suggested. That will help us to quickly go through and assign and reference back in terms of answering your questions. But for those of you who are still digesting what's been presented and you're thinking it through, if you come up with any questions during this period or as we go through the actual Q&A period, feel free to enter those questions into the chat function. And after the webinar, what we're doing is we're taking all of those questions that were received, we're going to review those and create an FAQ, a frequently asked questions document, per webinar. So that we can get this information out as far and as wide as possible so that we can make responding to the surveys and complying with whatever's next in terms of Roma Next Gen as easy as possible. Additionally, I'd like to emphasize your review of the components of Roma Next Generation really is critical. NASCSP's initial comment period ends April 1st, so it's going to be followed by the official Office of Management and Budget clearance process. So for the initial comment period that's sponsored by NASCSP, please keep an eye out once again for all of the surveys and the component pieces and discussion guides that are being provided. And you can find all of those once again on the Roma website under Roma Next Gen Resources. We did receive some questions about today's webinar and PowerPoint. It is being recorded, and the PowerPoint has already been posted to the website. But all of these recordings and PowerPoints will stay posted to the site for your reference, and so that you can share with your peers information that you've received. And this also could be helpful as you move throughout the survey process. Would like to note once again that in terms of providing responses to the Roma Next Generation components, we really do encourage you to go through the survey process and enter in your comments there. You will have an opportunity to provide high-level or overarching general comments and ask questions, but you'll also have the opportunity to provide insight regarding your thoughts on specific sections of each of the Roma Next Generation components. So while we do have an email set up for questions related to Roma Next Generation efforts, and I'll go ahead and send that via the chat function now. That's romanextgeneration2016@gmail.com. We do encourage you to, if at all possible, please use the surveys first for recording your comments and questions. That's the best framework we have for really understanding what your questions relate to, and so that we can get back to you as effectively and efficiently as possible. And once again, we do have a few more, at least one more webinar or a few more webinars coming up, so we would encourage you, if you haven't already, to sign up for those additional webinars. This is your opportunity to speak with those who know intimately, have been following this process intimately, you know, to speak with them and ask them questions and get some immediate responses related to the Roma Next Generation components. So we're going to see if the team is ready, if they have a queue of questions that they can begin to respond to. But thank you, because I do still see a number of questions coming in via the chat function. So we do appreciate you engaging with us as we move forward with Roma Next Generation.
Great, thank you so much, Jovita. We do have several questions to answer, and I do encourage all of you to continue to use the chat feature to send us additional questions. As we have noted, if we do not get to all of the questions, we will be responding later, and do also encourage you to use the surveys. So we have a question for Jeannie asking if we can speak a little bit further in detail about the reason for adding strategies versus outcomes.
Okay, thanks, Rae. So we certainly have added strategies, a whole new piece about having agencies and states report out what kind of strategies are being provided at the local level. And we see strategies, we're talking about community level change. When we go over the family and individual level of work on Thursday, we'll talk about services, which we sort of, in our world, means the efforts that we're putting forward to help create change at the individual family level. We haven't added those and gotten rid of outcomes. We will have both strategy, services, and outcomes. And I think that's really important for us to be able to show a picture of what the community action agencies and CSBG does, to be able to talk about what you have achieved at the local level, but also how you've achieved it. We really haven't ever had any information that tried to collect and analyze what kinds of strategies and services are community action agencies using to achieve these outcomes. And then also being able at some point to link that up with who those outcomes are being achieved for. Are they teenagers? Are they single moms? And that sort of gets to the analysis piece. So I don't think we have done strategies versus outcomes, but we are including both at this point. One positive thing that feedback we've got from a lot of folks is that there used to be in the NPIs, especially for family, a mix of outcomes and outputs, especially in the emergency services realm where you talk about food boxes and transportation vouchers. And we've taken those outputs out of the outcomes, the NPIs list, and those are now reported over under services. So I think that is a clearer delineation. It sends a message out to the world that we know the difference between outcomes and outputs.
Thank you, Jeannie. Barbara, did you have anything to add to that?
No, that's exactly what I would have said, that we've just added another dimension to make sure that our story is clear. We have not certainly abandoned outcomes. And I think that question came early on before we actually went through the national performance indicators and talked about the outcomes.
Thanks, Barbara. I will also add that we understand that strategies may not be tied directly to an indicator, in that your strategies can be more broad and can serve a variety of purposes within a variety of domains, which is one of the other reasons that we've broken out the strategies and the indicators themselves, because a lot of the strategies that you'll do have the capacity to impact multiple domains. So we have a question on, will the local agencies have access to the state and national aggregated information?
And I think the simple answer is yes. We will continue to put out state-level information and national-level information. We have a vision that there will actually be more access to data in our new Roma Next Generation. OCS has a cooperative agreement with NASCSP to develop a web-based data collection that would allow any individual, once it's up on the web, to go in and look at the results and perhaps do some manipulating of information across states. So I think we're going to have much more publicly available data in the future around CSBG and community action than we have now. We're doing a very similar thing in LIHEAP, and actually this year that information will go live for LIHEAP, and anybody will be able to go on the web and look at multiple years of state-level data for the LIHEAP program. And our vision is very similar for CSBG too.
I also do want to note that the software vendors will eventually be engaged in this conversation about the data systems and the online component. So in short, to answer this question, yes, eventually the vendors will be engaged with this process. Barbara, we have a question and a comment about community-level work and the role that the leadership plays at the agency level. If we would appreciate it if you could speak a little bit more on the increased emphasis on community-level work and the importance that the leadership will play at the agency level.
I think that it's true that often upper management or leadership takes a greater role in community level engagement because folks that are directly serving families and individuals have a lot of their time tied up in that direct service. But I think if we start to think about the national theory of change and if agencies, as they're doing their planning, their strategic planning process, start thinking about a local theory of change with the idea that what role does our agency play in change at all levels, that we should see more information coming from all levels in the agency. Or if the agency elects to be engaged in certain projects at the leadership level, that will be fine. That will be part of what they're going to put in their strategic plan. So I don't think it's an either-or situation where it has to be only leadership or confined to just the leadership. I think it can be something that all levels of the agency are participating in. I think there was an additional piece of that question about how you would report on it if you didn't have the data.
Yeah, Barbara, this is Jeannie. I'll just jump in there too. I'm not sure exactly what that second piece was about. It was about that maybe a sense that the focus has been on ensuring that programs are capturing and reporting data. And I would say that regardless of if an agency has set an outcome to move more low-income kids into post-secondary education in their community, chances are it needs to be the executive director who's working with that coalition, because it needs, you need the authority and the social capital of the leader of the agency garnering people in the community and pointing them in the direction of achieving that outcome. And, an executive director can be paid a lot of different ways, perhaps by CSBG. The issue is that it's a commitment that agency has made. It's the work of the agency, regardless of who's doing it or how that person is paid, that the agency is trying to improve conditions in the community. So I would say that, it's not a matter of it being a program, component, but it's the work of the agency. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and I think that would be encompassed in that local theory of change. When you're setting out to design your strategic plan, you say, what is it that we expect to change as an agency?
Thank you, Barbara and Jeannie. We do have another question on how it will be possible within the agency level to access information related to some of these higher level, broad-reaching efforts in order to incorporate them into a single report.
So this is an interesting question. The idea that somebody in particular fills out the IS report, and they are going to need to have access to information. But I think it's a bigger issue than that. It's about how the agency is using data. It goes back to what Barbara just said about strategic planning, theory of change, community needs assessment. What is the agency setting its sights on to change, whether it's at the community level or whether it's at an individual level through particular direct service? That is what we're looking at, being able to focus agencies' attention, all the management and the leadership on whether those goals are being achieved, and that's what should get rolled in to the reporting. This isn't about the report that's filled out once a year. This is about being able to monitor how an agency is progressing, how an agency is doing, and if it's not achieving what it needs to achieve, making some adjustments, tweaking a strategy, tweaking a service, getting new partners to the table perhaps that can help achieve the outcome. We think that it serves low-income people and low-income communities best if we look at this not as a report, but as a way to do our business better. And I know that's a tall order in a lot of ways, but I really do think that the complex issues of poverty that we're still dealing with today really demand that of us, that we look at this much differently than it just being about a report.
Thank you, Jeannie. There seems to be several questions in various forms that have come in around how the baseline would be established in the community level NPI reports. So we should talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and there was some discussion about what if you're doing one thing on a community level and one thing on the county level, one thing on the city level. There will be opportunities for multiple lines for you to do your reporting. So, so reporting on multiple things is okay, and that might help with the baseline question, because you don't want to lump two different community level initiatives together, because then the baseline becomes difficult to ascertain. But you just need to be able to identify what it is that you expect to change based on what it is you know about your community now. What's the circumstances in the community that you expect to change?
I think this is also a good place to reiterate that the Community Action Agency defines what community will be for this particular issue. So if I, as a Community Action Agency, have done a needs assessment and found out that I have a really high dropout rate in a local school, and we've made a commitment as part of our strategic plan to reduce that dropout rate, you're going to identify what area you're serving. Is it one school? Is it multi-school? Is it a school district? Is it a county? Is it a city? And all of those decisions are up to the Community Action Agency, because they know best what they need to do. And then that helps you identify the baseline. When you know what area you're looking at and you know the problem, then you know how to measure to get that baseline. And I think, Barbara, you said it very clearly in the presentation that, you know, a lot of this is driven by community needs assessment. And as we've sort of all known from a long time, when you start off right and you have a good needs assessment with strong data that tells you what's happening, then this other stuff becomes a lot easier.
I also want to chime in and note that, again, like the rest of the reporting, this is a menu, and if you're not doing it, then you are not required to establish a baseline or report on it.
And we also got a question, Rae, about do the goals and outcomes reflect things that are important to work towards, or if they are just things that, you know, certain agencies do and we're trying to include everything in the reporting. That also goes to the idea of local determination, and that, yes, these are things listed here are a menu, but you should be selecting based on your needs assessment and your strategic plan and your community action plan. If an agency has clearly gone through that process and identified what they want to achieve in a community, then they know exactly which of these outcomes make sense for them. And it's not all of them. It's only the ones that they have decided that they're going to focus their attention on. And I think that is really important. Nobody involved in the development of these pieces and this Roma Next Generation has any intention of pointing agencies in certain directions. It should be driven by what local folks want to achieve and the best strategy or service that that agency can identify to impact that problem and achieve the desired outcomes.
Thank you, Jeannie. We have a question on if we'll be expected to explain variances in our reporting. And yes, similarly to the way that we ask for comments and explanations now, we will be providing, and you'll be able to see this on the forms that you download while you're doing a more in-depth assessment of our proposed reporting. You'll be able to see a comment box that you'll be able to provide explanations and provide more of a context. And this will also be a huge part of the analysis and assessment and the relationship between the state and the agency, in that the state will be able to get a sense of the conditions in which the agency is operating and the types of potential barriers that are challenging And so there will definitely be opportunity to provide comment and explanation for all of your indicators and your results. We have another question on the fact that it is difficult in a complex social environment or context to tie specific agency efforts to some of these indicators, particularly those that are social indicators.
Okay, so I think this is, it's important to acknowledge this, and I'll go back, though, to my previous answer about it's a menu. So an agency would only pick decreased obesity or decrease in low birth weight if they had a project that was very targeted towards that particular outcome, and they could measure the results of that in a particular area. So this might be a very small, localized project, maybe a neighborhood, maybe blocks, where an agency is working on this, and they can get data that would show this, and that they can withstand, regular, the average ordinary person looking at it and not challenging their assumption about achieving that outcome. So it's not going to work for everybody in all cases, but there certainly are places where it's important to attack these problems, and we have agencies attacking some of these issues, and so we want to be able to reflect that work. So that would be kind of my initial response. Maybe Barbara or Rae have some additional thoughts on that. If not, we've got other questions. So while you're looking, Rae, there's a question that just came in that said if the lead entity is a council of governments versus a CAA, may we include all of the council of governments work in the reporting? And I would say that the answer to that is the same as it's been for a very long time, in that the instructions for the Community Services Block Grant, IS, say to report on what's in the purview of the Tripart Advisory Committee. So if they're a group that has authority over decision-making, if it's in their purview, then report it. But we're not looking for, a city or a county to report everything that's going on across that city or county in the area of community development or human services. So I think if a state or an agency has a really specific question about that, reach out to NASCSP, and they can talk some more with you about that. But the rules about that would be the same now as they've always been.
Thanks, Jeannie. I'm going to take a quick second to discuss a little bit more in depth the difference in the percentage columns in the Community Outcomes Report. We did go through that relatively quickly, so we are going to pull up the reporting form. So I want to draw your attention back to the last two columns, the actual change and the performance target accuracy. So the difference between these two is that the performance target accuracy is how accurate you were as an agency to what you said you would achieve versus what you actually achieved. So this will be your actual results and your target. So as you can see on this example, this agency was accurate in their capacity to plan, project, and achieve their intended results in the community. The actual change from baseline is the actual impact that this agency had in the community. So this agency, in our example, changed, had a 28% change from their 200 jobs that existed in the beginning. So they were successful in adding over 25% to their baseline. So the difference between these two is that one is an assessment of the performance targeting accuracy of the agency and is not related to the baseline or the existing starting point in the community, and is only related to the targeting versus the actual and the outcomes that are achieved, whereas the actual change is related to what is actually changed or increased in the community as a result of community action.
Okay. So another question we have, Rae, is are agencies required to do at least one community outcome or address, I assume that means address one community level outcome? And again, a couple of things that I would say about that is that nothing's mandated here. Again, it's all locally determined based on needs assessment, community action plan, strategic plan. But if I were looking at a community action plan and I saw nothing in an agency's community action plan that indicated that they were addressing community level efforts, a community level change, I would question the agency about that. So maybe there are others in the community who are doing that, but I think we would all agree that poverty is created by systems and institutions and community conditions, as well as by the individuals, the conditions that may impact a particular individual. So it's back to Barbara's example about the fish in the pond. You know, we can often teach somebody to fish, but if the pond is polluted or the pond is dry and we've done nothing about that, we've really not helped that person. So I think the answer is, you know, everybody should be driven by their community needs assessment, but folks should be, you know, as is always the case, should be taking a hard look at what do we need to do in our community to help low-income people seize opportunity and create economic mobility. And it's probably not just through the provision of direct services. But of course, there's lots of actors and lots of players in a community, and the Community Action Agency is not expected to do everything. So all of those things have to be weighed. And I would expect that the Community Action Agency is doing that, and that if a state CSBG director asked an agency to explain those kind of things, they could do that, and they could show in their needs assessment where they had thought through their approaches and what they were going to achieve.
I think one of the key things about Roma Next Generation that we want to stress is that we're trying to get people to think of what they do as a total holistic view. So what they do in their agency, what they do in their community, how they work together, how they address the needs that they've identified in their assessment. And so all of that thinking and logic and consideration of, well, how much resources do I have, how do I spread them out, who does the work, those are all things that that go into the plan, but it also is part, as Jeannie mentioned, it's part of a statewide system, and so there needs to be some interaction between the local and the state levels so that there's some continuity across the state for anti-poverty efforts. Did that sound like I was on my soapbox? Sorry.
Thanks, Barbara. Jeannie, we do have a question on whether the expectation is that the agencies would report directly into these local report forms and how that new online system is conceived to be working.
Wow, this is let's see, we have about 15 minutes left, I think. We could probably spend all the time on this question, but let me try to give some color to this, what we're thinking. So folks who have looked at the material on the NASCSP website see that we have PDF documents or Word documents that indicate what kinds of data, you know, we're looking at. And then we have what, you know, we're calling these reporting forms, which are, you know, how actual forms might look when they actually come out and when agencies have to start reporting. Well down the road from today, there's plenty of time for agencies to train and to change systems and that kind of thing to collect this information. As it is right now, we have different things going on in different states. So some states have created their own online systems for their agencies to report into. And so those, some states might want to make adjustments to their own systems to collect this information. Other states ask agencies to submit in paper or submit an Excel spreadsheet or, that kind of thing. So the first thing to understand is we have lots of different things going on across states, and we have states in differing places about what kind of support they may or may not need. So what we're trying to do, as I mentioned, we have a cooperative agreement with NASCSP to set up a web-based reporting process, and that would be for the state, but our plan is to try to create enough flexibility in that web-based system that if a state and its agencies wanted to report directly into the system, that capacity would be there. Or if a state wants to use another system and then upload data from one system to the web-based system, that would be a possibility. I won't complicate this with a note about there's what's called an online data collection tool that the federal government has, and that's really how we solicit a lot of information from states. So I guess the simple answer is that we are going to try to create flexibility for states and their agencies to do what works best for them. Now, that is not, that we've been focused on the content to date and haven't progressed a lot in our work on the system side, but we're confident that we'll be able to create some flexibility. So the hope is and the intention is that there'll be flexibility for states and agencies to do different things depending on where that state is at and where the agencies are and what their preferences are.
Thank you, Jeannie. We have a question for Barbara on how agencies should try to address the fact that living wage varies based on the area.
We've had several people asking questions about living wage, and I know at one point I was engaged in a discussion in one state about whether we should support a living wage across the state, and I think that that's something that has to be decided by the agency. If the agency is engaged in a living wage campaign, or if there is an established living wage that they're helping to work towards, then they'll be able to report on those areas. If there is no living wage established, then that may be a subject area that they're not able to report on. As Rae said several times, this is a menu, and if you're unable to report on something because there is no determination either locally or at your state level, then you are not able to report on the item. And you might just put that information in a text box in your report if you feel that you want to say, well, we don't report on this because that would be okay.
Great, thank you, Barbara.
Okay, so it looks like we have come to the end of the question and answer period. If we didn't answer any of your questions just now, please know that we have been noting all of these questions throughout the webinar, and be on the lookout for the FAQ. I just want to turn forward for a minute and look at our upcoming webinars. We have individual and family level work coming up on Thursday. That's 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And then we have the Tying It All Together webinar on March 22nd, 2 to 3:30 Eastern Time. And you can find the registration links to both of these webinars on our website. And then again, the recordings from the webinars we've already completed will be posted also.
So Lauren, I might just interject here one last thing. I think we had over nearly 400 people on the call today, and a lot of those are states, a lot are community action agencies, and regardless, or whether you're a state association, I would just really ask you as somebody who cared enough about our community action movement to get on the call today, go back to your agency and organize a conversation and a review discussion, a brown bag lunch, an opportunity for your management team or your frontline workers to look at this material together and to help each other get familiar with it, to think deeply about it and submit comments. As I said earlier, this tool will be as good as the Community Action Network makes it. And if we all put our best thinking on this, we'll have something that Community Action can be proud of, just like we do with the organizational standards, the state and federal accountability measures. We're far surpassing every other block grant in the country in some of this, and we can continue that if everybody spends a little bit of time and thinks and submits surveys. So I just ask everybody to go back into your organizations and help lead a review of the material.
Thank you, Jeannie, and thank you again to everyone who's been on the webinar. We hope to see you all on the webinar on Thursday, maybe some of you at the Roma Next Generation event at the NCAS conference, and thanks again.
Have a good afternoon.